Mr. James, with all due respect, this is a courtroom, not a basketball court. Judge Katherine Morrison's words cut through the packed federal courthouse like a blade. LeBron James sat at the plaintiff's table, facing a lawsuit he'd filed against the city over youth facility funding. I understand you're accustomed to having teams of people handle complex matters for you, but constitutional law requires actual legal expertise. The condescension was unmistakable. The media was eating it up. Judge Morrison was about to put this celebrity in his place on national television. But LeBron stood up calmly and said 5 words that would change everything. Your Honor, I'll represent myself. Have you ever watched someone make a decision that seemed like career suicide? The federal courthouse in downtown Cleveland had never seen anything like this. Every seat was packed with media, legal scholars, and curious onlookers who'd come to watch what many expected to be a celebrity's legal humiliation. Judge Katherine Morrison, 58, had been on the federal bench for 12 years. Harvard Law Review, Supreme Court clerk, constitutional law expert. She'd built her reputation on precision, no-nonsense jurisprudence, and an particular distaste for celebrities who thought fame qualified them for expertise. When LeBron James filed a lawsuit challenging the city's decision to defund 3 youth basketball facilities in low-income neighborhoods, Judge Morrison saw it as exactly the kind of celebrity activism that cluttered her docket. Rich athlete throwing money at lawyers to feel important about social issues. Mr. James, she had said during preliminary hearings, I hope you understand that good intentions don't constitute legal arguments. But today was different. Today, LeBron James had just fired his entire legal team. Live. In open court. With cameras rolling. Your Honor, I'll represent myself, LeBron repeated, his voice steady and confident. The courtroom erupted in whispers. His lead attorney, David Kelman from the prestigious firm Morrison and Associates, looked like he'd been slapped. LeBron, you can't be serious, Kelman whispered urgently. This is federal court, constitutional law. You'll be destroyed. But LeBron was already gathering papers from the table, organizing them with the methodical precision of someone who knew exactly what he was doing. Judge Morrison leaned forward, her expression mixing concern with what looked suspiciously like anticipation. This was about to be either a disaster or the most entertaining morning she'd had in years. Mr. James, I'm obligated to inform you that self-representation in federal court is highly inadvisable. These are complex constitutional issues involving the Equal Protection Clause, municipal law, and federal civil rights statutes. I understand, Your Honor. Do you have any legal training whatsoever? LeBron paused, a slight smile crossing his face. Some. The packed gallery leaned forward. Some legal training against a Harvard-educated federal judge? This was going to be a massacre. Judge Morrison's tone grew sharper. Mr. James, this isn't a game. The defendants are represented by the city's best attorneys. They will cite precedents, file motions, raise constitutional challenges that could tie this case up for years. Are you prepared for that level of legal combat? Yes, Your Honor, I am. Very well. Judge Morrison's gavel came down with finality. But don't expect any special treatment because of your celebrity status. In my courtroom, legal competence is the only currency that matters. LeBron nodded respectfully. I wouldn't want it any other way, Your Honor. The city's lead attorney, Patricia Wells, was already smirking. This was going to be easier than she'd thought. She'd prepared for months to face Morrison and Associates, one of Ohio's top firms. Instead, she was facing a basketball player with some legal training. Your Honor, this case is fundamentally about the constitutional principle established in Plyler v. Doe that states cannot create barriers to essential services for vulnerable populations. The city's decision to defund these facilities creates a discriminatory impact that violates both the Equal Protection Clause and established precedent regarding municipal obligations to provide equal access to public resources. Judge Morrison's eyebrows raised slightly. That was actually a competent opening. But she wasn't impressed yet. Mr. James, while Plyler dealt with education access for undocumented children, these are recreational facilities. How do you establish that basketball courts constitute an essential service? LeBron didn't hesitate. Your Honor, I'd like to cite Maureen versus Philadelphia, where the Third Circuit held that recreational facilities serving educational and developmental functions in underserved communities constitute essential public services under the Equal Protection Framework. The courtroom went completely silent. Patricia Wells looked confused. Maureen v. Philadelphia wasn't a widely known case. How did a basketball player know about a Third Circuit decision from 1987? Judge Morrison was staring at LeBron with new interest. Continue, Mr. James. Furthermore, Your Honor, the legislative history of the Community Development Block Grant Program, which partially funded these facilities, specifically requires municipalities to ensure equitable distribution of recreational resources. The city's decision violates both federal grant requirements and constitutional equal protection standards. This wasn't going according to anyone's script. Judge Morrison was no longer smiling. For the next 20 minutes, LeBron had systematically dismantled the city's preliminary arguments with surgical precision. He cited cases she hadn't thought about in years. He referenced legislative history with the accuracy of a law professor. Most disturbingly, he seemed to anticipate every legal challenge before the opposing counsel could raise it. Mr. James, Judge Morrison interrupted during one of his citations, where exactly did you acquire this legal knowledge? Patricia Wells jumped to her feet. Objection, Your Honor. Mr. James's qualifications aren't relevant to the legal arguments. Sustained, Judge Morrison said reluctantly, but her eyes never left LeBron. LeBron returned to his argument, but something had shifted in the courtroom's energy. The media section was buzzing. Legal observers were frantically taking notes. Even the court reporter looked surprised by the complexity of citations flowing from the plaintiff's table. Your Honor, LeBron continued, I'd like to address the city's assertion that budget constraints justify the selective closure of facilities. In Goldberg v. Kelly, this court's precedent establishes that administrative convenience cannot override constitutional protections. Patricia Wells was now visibly flustered. Goldberg v. Kelly was a Supreme Court case from 1970 about welfare benefits. How did LeBron connect it to recreational facilities? Furthermore, LeBron pressed on. The city's own demographic analysis, submitted as Exhibit C in their brief, demonstrates that 89% of affected families fall below federal poverty guidelines. This creates what Justice Marshall described in San Antonio Independent School District versus Rodriguez as a suspect classification deserving heightened scrutiny. Judge Morrison leaned back in her chair. San Antonio versus Rodriguez was a landmark education case, but LeBron was applying its equal protection analysis to municipal services. It was actually brilliant. Mr. James, are you suggesting that economic status creates a protected class for constitutional purposes? Not exactly, Your Honor. I'm arguing that when government action disproportionately impacts economically disadvantaged communities, courts must apply intermediate scrutiny to ensure the policy serves important governmental objectives through substantially related means. The courtroom was dead silent. Patricia Wells whispered urgently to her co-counsel. This wasn't the legal argument they'd prepared for. They'd expected to face emotional appeals about helping kids, not sophisticated constitutional analysis. Judge Morrison decided to test LeBron's knowledge further. Mr. James, the defendant will likely argue that recreational facilities don't trigger heightened scrutiny under equal protection analysis. How do you respond? LeBron opened another folder and pulled out a document. Your Honor, I anticipated that argument. I'd like to reference the Sixth Circuit's decision in Community Services versus Toledo, where the court held that when recreational facilities serve educational and developmental functions in areas with limited alternative resources, they become integral to the educational infrastructure and warrant heightened constitutional protection. Patricia Wells stood up shakily. Your Honor, I'm not familiar with that case. It's from 1994, LeBron said helpfully, turning to face her. The Sixth Circuit. Judge Merritt wrote the majority opinion. It's directly on point for our situation here in Ohio. Judge Morrison was now staring at LeBron with undisguised fascination. She pulled up the case on her computer and scanned it quickly. Everything LeBron had said was accurate. Mr. James, this is a remarkably obscure case to cite in this context. Your Honor, when you're arguing for children's constitutional rights, no relevant precedent is too obscure. The media section was going crazy. Phones were buzzing with texts and calls. This wasn't the celebrity legal disaster everyone had expected. Let's take a 15-minute recess, Judge Morrison announced, her voice slightly strained. As the courtroom cleared, Patricia Wells approached LeBron. What law school did you attend? LeBron smiled. I think that's between me and the court record. This is impossible. You can't have this level of knowledge without formal legal education. During the recess, Judge Morrison called her clerk into chambers. Run a background check on LeBron James. Education, everything. I need to know what we're dealing with here. 20 minutes later, the clerk returned looking confused. Your Honor, according to our records, LeBron James attended St. Vincent Street Mary High School, then went straight to the NBA. No college, no law school. That's impossible. He's citing cases I haven't thought about in years. He's applying constitutional doctrine with graduate-level precision. There is one thing, Your Honor. He's been making substantial donations to Harvard Law School for the past 8 years. Anonymous donations, but the amounts are significant. Judge Morrison felt a chill of understanding. Get me Harvard's registrar on the phone. Now. When court reconvened, Judge Morrison looked at LeBron with new eyes. Mr. James, before we continue, I need to ask you directly, what is your educational background? Patricia Wells objected again, but Judge Morrison overruled her. I'm entitled to understand the qualifications of counsel appearing in my court. LeBron stood slowly. Your Honor, I earned my Juris Doctor from Harvard Law School, graduating summa cum laude in 2019. I also completed a Master of Laws degree specializing in constitutional law in 2021. The courtroom exploded. Media members were shouting questions. Patricia Wells looked like she'd been hit by a truck. Court security moved to restore order. Judge Morrison banged her gavel repeatedly. Order! Order in this court. When silence finally returned, she stared at LeBron. Mr. James, you attended Harvard Law School while playing professional basketball? Yes, Your Honor. Evening and weekend classes, summer intensives, some online coursework. It took me 8 years, but I completed both degrees. Why didn't you disclose this earlier? Your Honor, my educational background wasn't relevant to the legal arguments. The law stands on its own merit, regardless of who presents it. Patricia Wells stood up, her voice weak. Your Honor, we request a continuance to review our strategy in light of this new information. LeBron turned to her with a slight smile. Ms. Wells, my qualifications haven't changed the city's constitutional violations. The law is the same whether I have a degree or not. Judge Morrison was quiet for a long moment, studying the man who had just turned her courtroom upside down. Mr. James, please continue with your argument. But now, everyone was listening with very different ears. Mr. James, the court is curious about the specifics of your legal education. Judge Morrison was no longer the condescending authority figure from earlier. Her tone now carried respect, curiosity, and perhaps embarrassment about her assumptions. How exactly does one earn a Harvard Law degree while playing professional basketball? LeBron organized his papers calmly. Your Honor, during the 2016 season, I approached Harvard about creating a custom program. I attended classes during off-seasons, summers, and weekends. When traveling, I participated via video conference. My teammates thought I was watching game film. Usually, I was reading constitutional law cases. The media section frantically scribbled notes. This was the story of the decade. What motivated this pursuit? Your Honor, growing up in Akron, I saw how legal barriers affected my community. Athletic success gave me a platform, but legal knowledge would give me tools for lasting change. LeBron pulled out a document. During my first year, I wrote a law review note on municipal obligations for recreational facilities. It was published in Harvard Civil Rights Civil Liberties Law Review in 2017 and forms the foundation for today's lawsuit. The implications were staggering. This wasn't celebrity activism. LeBron had spent 6 years preparing this specific case. Your Honor, I'd like to address defendants' budget constraint claims. In Memorial Hospital versus Maricopa County, the Supreme Court held that constitutional rights cannot be subordinated to fiscal considerations. Patricia Wells protested. That case dealt with emergency medical care, not basketball courts. The constitutional principle is identical. LeBron replied patiently. When government action affects fundamental rights, financial constraints cannot justify discriminatory impact. LeBron produced more documents. I commissioned a study showing that children losing access to these facilities experience decreased academic performance and increased juvenile delinquency. The facilities function as essential educational infrastructure. Patricia Wells was drowning. Even so, budget constraints require difficult choices. Ms. Wells, discovery revealed the city spent $2.3 million on decorative streetlights in affluent neighborhoods while claiming they couldn't afford $800,000 for youth facilities, plus $1.5 million for downtown art installations. Judge Morrison examined the financial records. Are you suggesting discriminatory intent? I'm suggesting selective application of budget constraints to programs serving minority low-income communities while discretionary spending continued elsewhere. LeBron handed Wells a thick document. I've prepared a remedial plan restoring facility funding through reallocation. No net budget increase required. Wells flipped through pages of comprehensive financial projections and legal precedents, her shock visible. Mr. James, did you prepare this yourself? Yes, Your Honor, though I consulted experts to ensure accuracy. Wells requested 30 days to review. LeBron countered, children are harmed daily. 7 days is sufficient. Judge Morrison agreed. 7 days, Ms. Wells. After the courtroom cleared, Judge Morrison asked LeBron to stay. In 25 years, I've never seen preparation like that. Thank you, Your Honor. Why keep your education secret? LeBron smiled. Would you have listened the same way if you'd known I was Harvard-educated from the beginning? Judge Morrison nodded slowly. You let the law speak first. Indeed I did, Your Honor. 7 days later, the courthouse was packed beyond capacity. Media from every major outlet wanted to witness the conclusion of this extraordinary case. Patricia Wells approached reluctantly. Your Honor, after reviewing plaintiff's remedial plan, the city seeks a negotiated settlement. 7 days ago, you argued his claims lacked merit, Judge Morrison observed. Upon reflection, we recognize the validity of plaintiff's constitutional concerns. LeBron stood. I'm open to settlement, but it must include full facility restoration, community oversight, and guarantees against future discrimination. Wells shuffled papers nervously. The settlement gives plaintiff everything requested. But LeBron wasn't finished. Your Honor, this case was never just about 3 basketball courts. It was about demonstrating that when people acquire tools to challenge inequities, change becomes possible. He turned to the packed courtroom. For 8 years, I studied law not to be a lawyer, but to create lasting change in communities like mine. Too often we hope someone else fixes problems. Hope isn't a strategy. Knowledge is. Judge Morrison listened intently. Children benefiting from these facilities will see that change is possible with passion and preparation. Education is the most powerful tool for creating change. Judge Morrison stood, causing the entire courtroom to rise. Mr. James, you've demonstrated what citizen advocacy means. You've shown excellence comes from unexpected places with genuine commitment. The settlement was approved. Would you guest lecture at law schools about constitutional litigation? I'd be honored, with one condition. Lectures must be free and open to community members. Legal knowledge shouldn't require law school. 6 months later, the facilities reopened with LeBron's Harvard diploma displayed on the wall. "See that diploma?" LeBron told young players. 8 years of studying while everyone thought I was just playing basketball. Education is the ultimate game changer. 10-year-old Marcus asked, "Could I do that too?" If you work as hard at learning as basketball, you can do anything. That evening, LeBron received a text from Judge Morrison. Harvard Law Review wants your follow-up article. 3 cities want you to review their policies. You've started something important. LeBron replied, "This is just the beginning." Education changes everything. Because sometimes the most powerful thing isn't using fame to solve problems. It's showing others they have power to solve problems themselves. LeBron hadn't just won a lawsuit. He'd demonstrated that with enough work, anyone can master any system well enough to change it. And that lesson was worth more than any championship ring.